Boom, bow, 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 bow. I love that. Keith, how you doing, buddy?
I'm still in the midst of a cold, so I
Oh,
forgive me if I'm like coughing and I may grab like a candy to suck on so I don't like you know get a dry throat. So
right on. Okay. Okay. Now I have to ask. What's your preferred go-to lozenge or candy?
the halls, but
Yes.
it has cough syrup in it, and if you have too many of them, like it's not good. So I had one, and it already kind of started upsetting my stomach a little bit. So I was like, okay,
Oh,
I'm actually using like stale candy cane from upstairs. So
nice. Hey,
yeah,
you know what? If it soothes, just like ginger ale, if it soothes, go with it.
yep,
Sorry to hear you're not feeling 100%.
yeah.
Um, yeah. So I have ideas, I have questions, I have thoughts as I have been on my own creative journey and recently gotten, not recently, about 9, 10 months now, um, gotten into Magic the Gathering as a hobby. Uh, but before I jumped into starting to share thoughts and questions, I wanted to ask if you'd had any interesting events or ideas or sort of epiphanies over the last little bit that you might want to share.
Just something that's helped me with my process.
Sure, yeah, why not?
Um, well, I mean, one of the things I'm always doing with my process. Let me share my screen while I start to pontificate
Absolutely.
here.
Pontificate, what a word. Love
Yeah.
it.
So, and I have a and truthfully, I do have a bit of an idea of what I want to do because I just thought about it like 30, 40 minutes before we got on, which is I'm working on the next issue of Saltwater. So I was like, I'm just like in the middle of like uh, drawing like astronauts and all that fun stuff, and we're back in space again, so all that kind of
Okay.
fun stuff. So yeah, anyway, I don't want to give too much away, but I figured I can draw an astronaut because it's always fun to draw people floating in space.
Hell yeah.
So one of the things that I'm always doing with my process is as I'm working on pages or working on a project is thinking about what's working, what isn't working, what I want to try to achieve for the next project I'm working on. And one of the things that I've been doing for the last couple of years, and I think I've even talked about this, is where I've worked one to one proportionally
Mm.
with my pages. I used to work at a larger size. So the size I'm working on right now is it's like 11 by 17 ish size. And the whole reason that I worked at this size when I first started is because that's the size that traditional comic book artists would work on, right? And they would
Yeah.
shrink down to with the side the whatever the 6.58 time by 8 ratio is of a comic book.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I can't remember. It's that may be wrong, but uh, and they used to do that because the printing process, um, like when you needed to uh, like the lines themselves had to be like thick, right? The printing didn't allow for nuance of very light lines, right?
Hmm.
So you work large to small because you would also like when you're working that small as a with it's very hard to get good detail in when you're working that size. So you work larger. It allows for you to put in more detail in a uh, um, much more specific way. Sometimes some artists, like I think Eric Larson of Savage Dragon, work like
Mm.
2 times, no wait, 3 times the size of a comic book page. So
Whoa.
so they work like really because I mean that allows for him to put in super dynamic and like many more characters, or it's more comfortable for them to work that at size, whatever their reasoning is. Anyway, because I work digitally, the reason why I was working at 11 by 17 size, or 10 by 15 more accurately, was
Mm-hmm.
because I wanted to emulate what I was, what the traditional artists use, but I don't need to. There isn't a necessity for it, because um, I can zoom in, right? If I want to.
Yeah.
So I don't want to get. I mean, I guess this is the place to get in the weeds if I wanted to, but
Yeah.
the design of just to go a little bit into to specifics, the granular here. So I'm using a pressure sensitive pen or stylus, and Photoshop uses when you're using like a brush. If I were to zoom, it's essentially what you'd call a stamp. So that singular image that I just stamped, that you just saw, is actually a brush. And
Yeah.
when you adjust your brush settings, you can get that individual little stamp to uh, do different things, so that it looks like it's a line. So repeat you can see it's like a different angle. Repeat it again, and then keep on. It goes to different angles. And when you the the when you move your arm at a certain speed, you're going to get a succession of those stamps, so it looks like a line, right? So, if I do that, those are a bunch of those stamps. I'll just undo that real quickly. But those are a bunch of those individual stamps that look like almost like a singular line, right?
Yeah.
Um, Now, because I have the ability to make the brush size larger or smaller, I can make the line. You couldn't tell that was a series of stamps that were like really kind of almost triangularly shaped. At that size, and I'll zoom in, and it almost creates like a rough looking line. Zoom in even more, so you can see here it creates almost like a rough looking line. That's just like a
Mm-hmm.
series of stamps, right, together at different angles. So it creates that rough looking line when it's much smaller. And I like that. You can there are stamps or brushes that are like just like ovals or circles. You can
Yeah.
have boxes. You can have any. Essentially, the beauty of a brush is that you can take like what, as I said, what would be called a stamp of any kind of shape of any.
Mm.
It could be a picture of something if you want, right? So
Yep.
it could be anything, and then it'll create like an interesting. It could create an interesting line or it could create interesting textures or patterns, whatever you want to use it for.
Yeah.
Um,
On that, Mary Landro, who makes Rich the comic, I interviewed her a long time ago, and she uses that where her stamp that she's made is half a chain link, because she had to draw a lot of
mm,
chains, and she did like some stuff with Spawn, and she made it so that she could, yeah, just stamp and go, and it would draw the whole chain for her instead of
yeah.
having to sit there and, you know, every little link.
That's right. You can be smart about it. I'm not always smart about it, but if you can either create it yourself, or they exist out there. You can find some like brush sets or stamp sets or pattern sets out there, and um, as all different things that'll suit your whatever it is that you're working on. So anyway, the limitation though of a stamp is that um, they do, because they're essentially like a certain size. They will, if you make them too big, you can start to see pixelization of the
Oh,
right. Anyway, so So there are limitations to using certain kinds of brushes. If you work really small or really large, you'll see those things if you find a brush that you really like. Like, so working really large with this brush sometimes is a bit of a challenge, because if I want like a nice smooth line, working large, you can see the teeth a little bit more. Like it's a as you can see there, it creates for like a much um, more like toothy line. Whereas when
Hmm.
it's smaller like that, you don't see that as much, right? So an advantage of working one-to-one ratio with a comic book page is that that smaller line theoretically is going to be easier to do, because you're not everything's smaller, right? So I a couple years ago was like, maybe if I work small again, it's going to be easier for me to work,
Yeah.
to do these like really nice lines, and excuse me, and by doing that, I'll be able to save some time as well. And so I tried doing it with some pages or some books that I worked on, and I liked working that way. It was for sure there was some benefits to it. Um, but then one of the things that I noticed too was that um, it did have some limitations that working larger size don't have, which is um, putting in certain amount of detail. Like I can only, because if I work at a with the brush that I use currently, and I'm working
Yeah.
really small, and I like at a one-to-one ratio, and I want to zoom in to like a page where there's a lot of people, and I
Yeah.
want to be able to draw those people. It's really hard to have control, because those the it doesn't the line. Well, it works really well when it's like something like this. That's a much smaller size than, let's say, that's in my 15. But when it's
Hmm.
really really small, to like control, you can see here, I'm trying to draw a circle, and that's what comes out. Like, it's really hard to. It doesn't quite have that smoothness, right? And let's say make it smaller. It just doesn't have as much control. So it's a weird kind of thing. It's like there's a sweet spot to it.
Huh. Yeah.
So I've decided that I wanted to go back to drawing 10 by 15 again for this latest saltwater issue. And I think, I've discovered a couple of things, your epiphany moments, which is using smoothing. So right up there,
Oh.
you just saw right here. I can actually put in, like, I'd never really used smoothing because I didn't need to until I started working uh, at a much smaller size, and I was like,
Oh, right
man, how
on.
can I control this easier now? Well, I can control it easier for certain things, but other things are more difficult to control. Anyway, I was like, oh well, if there's a way to actually make a line so that it has a bit more of a smoothness, it takes a bit of the handshake out, right?
Hmm.
So if I go even higher with this, and I make well, that's way high. I don't want 80%. See, it's hard. There's no like handshake or hand movement. It's just a very, now it does slow down your computer. It takes more processing to do this. So,
Yes.
like it's a trade-off, right? It does allow for me to, if I the higher I go with that smoothing, the slower the processing is. So really, it just gives me a bit of an edge with, like, if I go to 10 or 20 or 30%, it gives me if I'm drawing things with circles, right? Like, it's a little bit easy. My handshake, it's a lot less of a handshake. So, I can
Yeah.
draw a circle a little bit. So there you go. A little bit nicer circle. There's just certain things that it allows you to do. Anyway,
Yeah. It
that
cleans it up
was
a little
that
bit.
was yeah. It was just because I was working smaller. Other issues arose, and so um, I've decided to go back to working larger. But now I have some new tools that I didn't have prior to working larger, due to working smaller again. So that's like a new thing I'm going back to, just to see, because I think part of figuring out like what it is that you like to do. There's some artists that you look at their work, they detail is um like okay, a good example is probably like Mike Mignola. He doesn't put
Oh,
like super detailed characters and backgrounds. Like they're shapes. They're just supposed to like they're supposed to give the reader, the viewer, that they know that it's like a person because it has the shapes of a person and it's
yep.
got the gesture of a person, but the detail isn't there, right? And it doesn't really necessarily need to. And I like that aesthetic. But then there's some artists like let's say like like was it George Lopez? Uh, the
G-
George
give me
Lopez.
give me the book.
He did Superman and like I think I'm thinking of the right. Anyway, an artist like Carlos Pacheco or somebody who does a lot of detail. Sorry, I'm a bit brain fogged right now from all the
You're
drugs I've
good.
been on. Um, anyway, like you have artists that put a super amount of detail into their pages, and I like that aesthetic as well. I like the idea of if you look at like if you're looking at a page, they're skilled enough to make sure your eye goes where it needs to, but then they
Mhm.
also put in a lot of detail that um like requires a really steady hand to be able to draw really small little things. And so and they have the work, the sensibility to be able to do it, or they're fast enough that it doesn't like um prevent them from getting their pages out. And maybe it does. It's
Yep.
possible it does. Just because you can work at a smaller size doesn't mean you need to, right? So
Yeah.
anyway, I think I'm kind of in the middle a bit. I'm not like is I like drawing in a very rough way where you can get just by looking at it at the sense of what it is that you're looking at if it's a very small thing. But
Yep.
I also like putting in some of the detail too. So I'm trying to figure out like what's a good balance. So working small the
Sure.
way I was for the last 2 years, I think gave me the ability to like draw a bit faster at a pretty high quality, but not but I was having some difficulty getting some of the detail in there that I'd want to. So you kind of had to work around that and make it look like
Mhm.
kind of again it is the Mike Mignola case. But I was like, but I did want to go in there a little bit more and put the detail in. And it's even with like
Yeah.
a like I also work with this it's called the Kniff brush number 16, which is not as toothy. I like working with this brush as well, so I can put in a much finer line. But um, it's one of those things where it still has limitations if you're working really in a small space. So, long story short, I've gone back to working 10 by 15. I have new skills, new tools that I can use to get some of that kind of some of the limitations maybe I had prior. And so um, that was one of the new things, and it's not like a super big epiphany. It's just more trying different process,
Yeah.
just to constantly um, keep yourself engaged. I guess is the best way to think about it.
Well, and I mean that is so important to be able to, even with someone as established a career as yourself, Keith, to be able to tweak, adapt, self-evaluate, and go, you know what, I'm not doing this quite the way I want, or even just, hey, I want to try something different, and to be able to allow yourself to do that. One, love it. And one of my favorite sayings I got from an old employer is, every day is a school day. Like, learn something every day. If you're not trying something and failing a little bit at something, you're not advancing. You're just kind of continuing to do what you do. So absolutely, I'm enjoying the fact that you're allowing yourself that flexibility, uh, and it's also really cool to get to see you adapt and change. That way, you can sort of accomplish what you're after. Keith, You have just now. This is interesting to me. So the way that you've done the outline of your astronaut, or I guess your the word is totally blanking me. It would normally be when you have a character with some sort of lit background, a silhouette. So we've
Yeah.
sort of got a semi-silhouette of this character, and because of the way that you do your outlining, the chonky sort of lines you go with. Now that you've added these valves that are sort of in a different style, I love how it's just changed the composition. It's so cool.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, it's one of those things I think where when you can again give yourself that breathing room, you can learn a lot. And going back to the way you used to do things, going back to especially once you have a new skill set, can be so valuable. Like I remember doing videos where like originally when I started doing this, I would record everything over a Zoom meeting. I would throw it all into my editor, be able to edit it, control it. It would take a long time, but I could get the exact sort of thing I wanted. And then I switched over to StreamYard, which is the lovely platform we're on now. And it takes a lot of the editing workload off my shoulders because I can just click a button and all of a sudden, you know what? If we only really care about seeing what you're doing, we can do that. And well, people won't see us. My God, your art is here. And I can click this other button and bada bing, we're back. Or maybe if, we don't need to see the art right now, we can just me and you talk. So it's all doable. And again, allowing that flexibility is so useful to reflect. So congrats. I think that's awesome. Oh no. Now, when it comes to the oh no was for your astronaut. Um, sort of one of the things that I don't know if I call it an epiphany, but an appreciation that I've come up for or found is just sort of in storytelling. So, as you're aware, I've been doing some writing of my own. Um, I've gotten my first rejection letter, which is wonderful, and
Good.
um, I'm just sort of pushing through, not pushing through, not like it's difficult. I just have to sit down and write, which is fun. But yeah, I've gotten into Magic the Gathering recently, and it's got me thinking about the way that we tell stories. Primarily so far for the folks out there, although I've interviewed over 100 different comic book artists and all that, help get campaigns done and books made and just had fun letting people say their piece and learning and all of that, which I love. When I do my creative pursuits, typically it's writing and it's just prose. I have not yet found a story I think that I want to make that will fit within the comic book format, and that's the only reason. I'm sure it'll come, especially with the way that I am. But it's been a lot of prose, and as I've been getting into Magic the Gathering, one, I love the art. I think the art's beautiful, but the theming of it has been fascinating to me. So I'm going to share my screen real quick, as long as this program allows me. It doesn't. Yeah. So Magic the Gathering does a couple of cool things, where they have things called cycles and flavor text. So cycles, for instance, are cards like this, where they're all called Harbinger, and they all sort of do the same basic thing, which is, when creature comes into play, you may search your library for in this case, goblin card because it's a goblin. Reveal it, shuffle your library, put that card on top. There's an elvish version, a fairy version, a giant version, Kithkin tree. The cycle is the harbingers. They come out. You go, you find your cards you want, put it on top of your library. So next turn, you get your card. I think that's cool. I think from a storytelling perspective, it's interesting as well because we're getting to see how all of these different characters across very different races are doing essentially in function the same thing, but also in their art, they seem to be holding some sort of light which helps them find their person. And I really just appreciated that sort of storytelling through art, even though the artists are all different. And the other thing I was really into, where was it? Is this set of 4 cards? I don't know the names of the cards. I'm sure I could just look it up. But all the magic cards, not all of them, a lot of them have flavor text. And this one, these 4 separate cards, again, different artists for all of them, tell a story. So the first one that you find is 4 little goblins trapped by the sea. One teased a serpent, and then there were 3. The next card, 3 little goblins enjoying their brew. One bumped an ogre, and then there were 2. 2 little goblins out in the sun. Down came a griffin, and then there was 1. One little goblin shook up the ground. When the dust cleared, no one was found. And it's a different way of sort of storytelling that I really appreciated and I found interesting, because as I've been consuming comics for, I would say, a fair chunk now. I've got a large number of them. I have a good grasp in the medium, right? I don't see that often now in writing or in panel work, that many comics that make me go, oh, wow, I've never seen that before. I loved those moments when they happened. I continue to enjoy reading comics and always searching out that next wow moment from the structure of comics. So being able to shift medium from comics or prose into basically cards, it's been fascinating. And then that actually had me reflecting on the book that you're making with your mother, because some of it is comics, some of it is prose, and that is often accompanied with an illustration. And just sort of the different ways that we approach storytelling in the visual medium and put it alongside prose or some sort of small and or large chunk of writing. Really quick, our wonderful friend Paul Kemp, once again, always a treat to catch Sketchy Goodness live. Hope you're both doing well. Paul, I'm good. Keith is a little under the weather, but trucking through, cruising through space as we can see.
And I'll see Paul in short. We'll see each other at Gotham Central, I believe, at Summer Bash.
Yes,
that's
very soon.
The weekend after. So 28th and 29th of June.
Love it. For those of you who aren't aware, you're probably aware, but just in case, hey, Gotham Central is a comic shop in, I want to say Mississauga, but that feels wrong.
Yeah, it's Mississauga. Yeah.
Perfect.
Mississauga.
Yeah. And it's arguably one of the biggest comic shops in the area, certainly in product quantity and diversity. Square footage, I think it actually is. Massive shop. The folks there, I find them wonderful, and they put on a lot of cool events. And the Summer Bash is one of their events where basically they have a bunch of really cool comic book creators like Keith come out, and basically you can get all their books, the indie books. You can likely at least commission someone if they're open to it, and if nothing else, get some really cool signatures and meet some cool artists. But yeah, it's just something where I've been enjoying the ways that people can include prose into a more visual medium, and it just sort of got me thinking and pondering different ways of doing it. Like me personally, when I've read, I think fantasy is the most. It's one of my biggest. When I'm not reading comics, it's fantasy. And I always have appreciated the illustrations within fantasy. Often the map that's in the front of most fantasy books, because that's just a thing that fantasy does since Tolkien. And anytime some sort of major scene is illustrated along with whatever scene is going on to sort of give you a visual idea of what is happening, I enjoy that. And yet at the same time, I find for me, when it's a treat, I really like it. When it's, if you get a 350-page book and every 10 to 15 pages, you might get an illustration. Sometimes it's far less. I've seen only entire, novels where it's just 2 or 3. I really enjoy those. And I find in prose more is less. But yeah, it's just been interesting. And then that even got me sort of spiraling and thinking about graphic design, to the point where something I didn't know I appreciated so much was my favorite authors are a Salvatore, very long history writing for Forgotten Realms and Wizards of the Coast and D&D and all that. And one of the things that he did or I guess his publisher did, I'm not sure if he had a say in it or not, but it was done in his books, and I think it's great. In his chapters, he might have a section where he's writing something, and then the chapter will not end because thematically what is being written is all together, but a scene changes, and instead of just a new paragraph or a space, you would get a sword. It was done in just like a black, simple design style, but it was just a good way to be like, hey, here's a break. We're changing scenes. And it's just something that I didn't realize how much I appreciated until I was starting to read other books, and they would go through, and I'd hit a scene change where it might only be 3 dots sort of spread out among the page, or sometimes nothing. And yeah, I was sort of scratching my brain about how much I appreciated the visuals. Oh, Keith, what have you done to this astronaut? Oh, no.
Well, I mean, I think what I'm getting a sense from what you're talking about is that story making can be it's only limited by your imagination, right? So you can there's been a format to making comic books for many decades now, and there's been some creators that have broken out of that to tell stories in different ways than the traditional way, and it's a lot of it's only been limited because of the ability to get it out to the mass audience, right? So
Yep.
like now, which most of us can get access to a printer anywhere in the world, and if you understand how to you can even have them do it for you, but if you have some idea of how to lay it out, you can get something printed that you don't even have to print a huge amount, but you can basically print what you want, and it can be all different sizes. It could be different kinds of formatted types of papers and cover and all that kind of stuff. So you could do a 3D printer, version of something, I'm sure, right? So you're limited by your imagination because the technology is available to be able to do many things that weren't necessarily available to all of us at one time, right? And so you can now do a prose book that has sequential pages in it, and spot illustrations. It may not sell very well. It may be more costly than something else, but you can do it. And it's not, and I think there's, if it's something that makes the story work better for it, right? Then why not? And so I think what you're discovering is that there's things you like out there that tell stories using different kinds of structures, but it's not to say that you yourself can't implement some of those structures into, take from comics, take from Magic the Gathering, or the Forgotten Realms, or whatever types of role playing. You can make it into something a little bit different, especially if it's in a story that you want to tell, that's interesting to you, right? I don't see why you couldn't do anything like that. So I is that kind of where you're going with a lot of this? Is that you're just you're seeing other ways that there's stories that you like?
I guess so. I don't particularly know if I maybe had a point. It was just I'm beginning to definitely appreciate the different ways in which stories are told, and I think I've noticed how important the visuals are for a lot of it, which just somehow simultaneously feels like I'm getting away from comics and yet reinforces to me just how important they are, because of how succinct they are, and uh, singular in their aim of getting the story communicated through dialogue, narration, and then whatever the visual presentation is.
But here's the thing, though, too. When you're exploring out there in the world of creating stories for yourself, uh, you need to be inspired by things outside of the format that you're maybe initially were drawn to, right? Because if I were to only copy comic book artists and figure out how they do things, I'd be limiting myself to all different other kinds of artists out there, right? You
Yeah.
need to be able to. I need to know, like artists from the Renaissance. I need to know about modern painters. I need to know what 3D sculptors are doing. I need to know what photographers are doing, or like there's all different places you can go to learn and be inspired. You shouldn't be limited to that one area of comic books that because here's the thing, if it's something that you at some point it'll if it's something that you love, you'll be drawn back to it anyway, right? You'll come back to it, and now you'll come back to it with a completely different idea of what you would want to say, right? And I think you're in the really early stages of self-exploration, right? Which is really, it's both really exciting but also kind of scary, because you're like, I don't know what I'm doing. I really have no idea what I want to do. Like, I'm trying stuff and I know I'm failing a lot, and I'm okay with that. But
Hell yeah.
I also don't have any experience to back any of this up. So I don't know how to gauge what I'm doing is whether I have nothing to compare it to. And that's the time for you to be as exploratory as possible, to open up that sphere as large as possible, because inevitably what will end up happening is once you start getting those experiences and understanding how to write and create and stuff, you are going to start to limit yourself, because there's only so many things you can do at a time, right?
Yeah.
But having more of a, you do get into that kind of the more you work on things, it's very easy to kind of get into that very narrow lane, because that's what appeals to you. But that narrow lane was created because of what you've been exposed to. So if you, for example, if you're in a small area and you're not exposed to a lot of different things, your knowledge and experience is limited to that. If you go a little bit more outside of your zone of interest, like into a city, now that becomes a much more diverse experience set. And then if you go even more outside of that and you travel different places around the world, then all of a sudden you're seeing things, and your brain is being introduced to completely new ways of thinking about things. And the older you get, it's harder for those neural pathways to kind of create new paths, right? You're pretty much set in those, I think, limitations, right? It's just more difficult. So what I'm saying is, when you're starting something new, I think the bigger that sphere is, the more diverse it is. It's more overwhelming, but it's also it's going to give you many more possibilities of ideas and tools. And then you'll have a lot more to draw from once you've decided how you're going to narrow it down a little bit, so that you can, not be so overwhelmed and just like focus on something, right? And so that's the whole idea of like going out when you're first like going to be an artist, and you go and you want to see what other artists are doing. That's why you go travel around and go to different museums and galleries and read different, like you're trying to figure all that stuff out. It's important to see all that. And so that's kind of what you're doing right now. You've really only known about comic books, but you with the lens of like, oh, I'm interested in this because I like reading it. Now you're coming at it from, I might want to do something like this, but I don't know if it's comic books. So now you kind of need to throw that large net out there, all different places, and see what it is that you really like and what really resonates with you, and some of the tools you can learn from, and then decide if you want to come back to the comic book world. If you want to, maybe you're going to be games. Maybe that's going to be your jam, is like writing for games, writing for role playing games. Maybe it's going to be writing for historical or alternate history role playing games. Who knows? Like, it could become very specific, but the only way you're going to know that is if you throw that wide net out there, right?
Well, it's interesting you bring that up. For the first time in my life, I am going to be leading a game of Dungeons and Dragons. So classically, it would be called the DM, Dungeon Master, or Game Master is the newer term that people seem to be liking. And it's been very interesting because I'm basing it in this world that I've created in my head and written little stories a part of. And it's funny because I started with the aim of I need a way to explore this world into subjects and places that I don't think of, because it'll help me sort of flush out and understand things, even if there's something boring like economics or the trade routes of an area and why that matters, but also like thematically it'll push me to create different characters that I might not have seen or places. So I started with, okay, in what I've written, what do I know? I know that a certain city exists. I know a set of characters exist. And through the process of like making maps for it, just to be able to explain to my players, and then setting up, okay, well, where does this person actually located, right? Like, oh, I have an elf in a forest. Okay, cool. A forest is a very vague and ambiguous area. So put it on a map. What does it look like? What type of trees are in that forest? How does this thing get through the forest? And what does it eat? And what does it live on? And how would it interact with someone who comes to see it? So I've been able to do a lot of like scenarios, and also wanting to tell a story within the world where I don't want my players to be on rails through a story I've written, and is sitting in a Word document. I want them to be able to explore this world and have a story that is totally new to me, but obviously from me. So it's fascinating you bring up like creating a tabletop game, because it's what I'm doing in this world I've created, and I'm finding it creatively very empowering, and I'm lacking the word, but like it's like a driving force to be able to further flush out the world and the events that happen to it. Because I do still want my players, to be able to come into this world and see my characters that I have written stories for, maybe mid-story. So maybe they'll find a certain character in an armory picking up weapons to go on an adventure where I've written that story. So it's been fascinating exploring different ways of telling stories. And I think because setting up, say, a player encounter with a monster is a lot different than me just writing a story about a monster in a cave, where it's like, okay, my players need to be able to explore this area. What is in the area? How does it function? How does it work? And I've really enjoyed that way that it's making my brain have to process it. So that later on, maybe, I don't know, if I end up using that area, that set of characters, a specific event that happens to my story, it all sort of gets to stitch itself back together in a way I enjoy. And I think that is the key. And who knows, maybe some of this will get me a rejection letter or two along the way, which would be great.
Well, what you're doing is you're accessing your ability to imagine, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a skill that some people, it comes a little bit easier than to others, but it's something that you can work on. And so by reading about stuff and by thinking about it and trying to imagine what it looks like, it's what I do all the time. I'm always constantly imagining things in my head, real life situations, or doing something like this where I'm trying to like draw on my library of images that I have in my mind's eye, or like things that are around me, TV, movies, books I've read, just life. And you're thinking about it And the more you think about it, the more you'll come up with like little nuances to it that will, you can build upon what you started, right? So you're
Hmm.
going to start out your world. You're essentially just making it very simple. You're God, like you're like
Yeah, yeah,
you're
100%.
the game master and call you God. Like you're the one, you've created the world. You're now putting players into this world where they do have their own ideas and ways of doing it, but it's controlled by you
Hmm.
in a matter of speaking. So if it's out of the realm of the laws that you've created, they can't do it, right? So they still
Yep.
have to work within the sphere of your influence. And the more you, because they're going to come up with questions and things that you'd be like, oh, I didn't even think about that. That's it. Well, now you can add that on to make it a much more detailed, textured world,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Now you can go down a path that you hadn't even thought about. What does that path look like? And maybe they've given you some ideas. It's part of the, joy of working with a team is that if you have other creative people, they'll bounce ideas off of your ideas, and all of a sudden, before you know it, you've come up with a really cool idea. But that's, so it's just a matter of how much you're willing to let go of some of your own ideas to let the other people come up with their ways of what they think they would like, and then that's how you learn whether you're the type of person that likes to work on a team, or if you're like, nope, I have my ideas. They constantly derail them. I don't like what they have to say. I haven't found people that come up with ideas that I really like. So,
Hmm.
I don't think that's going to be the experience. I think most people, especially when they're creative themselves, they will come up with some interesting, because they'll be thinking about the world too in ways that you hadn't thought of, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Based off of your ideas.
Well, it's funny too because like in this specific instance, um, I let my players know, hey, we're gonna do. I'll have you guys start at level 5. And for the folks out there, you don't really need to know a lot, but it means that they're basically not brand new heroes; they're experienced. And one of my players turned around like, "Oh, what races and classes do we have access to here?" Because D&D has a ton. Um, and I originally had told all of my players, hey, I would like to keep it the basic stuff from the player's handbook, but if you want to try something different, or if you have a story or are really passionate about a certain thing, tell me. Come to me, talk to me about it. We'll play. We'll see what we can do, right? Because I don't want to say no,
Yeah.
because I think the beauty of any story, and specifically Dungeons and Dragons or most tabletop games, is the idea of yes and. Um, so one of my players came to me and was like, "Hey, I want to make like a bird person," and in my world that I'd written with my stories that this was all based in, that doesn't exist. And I was like, and I caught myself for a moment going, Dad, hold on. I was like, explain what you want to do and how it all works. And if you can theme it to fit, I'll let you do it. And they came up with a really cool story that was interesting, that explained how this bird person exists in this world where previously that wasn't real. And I was just like, oh, yeah, okay, cool. So now he doesn't know this, but in my brain now, there's a whole continent out there of bird people, or perhaps animal people. And that's where his character's from, and he'll come back, have some adventures. It'll be grand. Um, but yeah, I've really enjoyed that process of like bouncing ideas off of somebody else and having them push back. At the same time, interestingly, when I'm writing stories for myself, or I should say, when I'm writing stories that I am authoring to publish one day and get rejection letters for, which is what we're doing, people. We are sending off stories to get rejection letters, and if the odd one gets accepted, we're winning. Um, I have found it odd where I don't want to allow people to mess with the story, but in the context of the D&D, I'm like, yes, let's throw every wrench in the gears as possible, and let's roll with it. Let's see what I can come up with. To a degree, I haven't yet said no.
But here's the thing, though: you're learning how to work with others, you can transfer that to like you getting, if you're starting to submit, you may be like, you know what, it works so well when I have other people kind of give me ideas, and in the game master realm, why not do it here? Why not, like, be open to changing this story? You just have to be willing to share the credit, right? Like,
Oh
depending on how
yeah.
much influence the other person has in the story. If it's an idea that you're like, oh, you know what, I can take that idea and I can manipulate it into the story, you can always give somebody a nice little prop for helping
Oh
you out.
yeah.
But if it's more editorial, you may want to give them the credit for that. But that may be a way for you to improve upon, the your limitations, right? If your limitations of writing gets you rejections, and you're like, they're not necessarily giving you suggestions as to what to improve upon, well, then you may go, well, maybe I need an editor. Maybe I need to find somebody that's going to help
Mm.
me to like, okay, this is rejected. They kind of just said it was too whatever. What do you think? And have that person go, yeah, I see where they're saying that. I'm going to give you some suggestions to maybe with some of the plot, some of the character development, and then you may be like, oh, okay, great. I hadn't even thought of this, but I can see how this is going to work for me, right? And so, it's all, as I said, it's all gathering tools from all your experience of now kind of being into wanting to create stories, and how you can apply that to
Oh
something
yeah.
else, right?
Oh, big time. Yeah. And it's and again, I have been published, but I will not say yet I'm a writer, so to speak, or a creator. But in this creative journey that I'm on, uh, it's been very fun and also um, I guess empowering, I guess, or supportive to yeah, to have people push back on ideas and bring up subjects or concepts that I hadn't cared about or thought about. Because it's gotten me thinking about different things. Um, yeah. I'm having a writing issue. A couple episodes ago, you drew two warriors, um, and I'm
Yeah.
writing a story for them. I'm having a good time with it, but I have hit a point where I'm like 4,000 words in here. But I've hit a point where I'm just stalled because I want them to have to do something horrible. I just haven't yet figured out how I want them to have to do it, and it is killing me not to be able to quite just go do it. Um, just because I can't logically walk through how they get from where I want them to have to be from where they are, and it's
Right.
amazing. And it's fun to play that sort of gymnastics with myself. Keith, is that okay? Hold on.
What?
As I am interpreting this, one dude's hand is off. Ouch. But is also the arm like popped out the socket? Is that what I'm seeing here? Like the shoulders just out of the socket?
You mean right here?
Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know. I'm just trying to. I'm
Oh.
playing around with it. I don't know what's going on, to be honest with you. It's exploration, right? It's letting. There's something about the stiffness of it that I didn't quite like, so I just kind of, you know, started to play around with what it looked like if it was not like that. But yeah,
Oh.
just
I don't.
playing around with this and seeing what happens, and this is why I like doing this, because it's like, I get to. I don't have any motive with this. This is not coming. This is, at this point, I'm not using this for any kind of like like story I'm working on. So I can kind of just really mess around with it, and if it works, great. If it doesn't, awesome. Who cares, right? It's just a fun uh, thing to try. Um, but yeah, it's a little weird. That's for sure.
I mean, the hand off thing, I was like, all right, cool. Like we're in, right? We're Luke Skywalkering it. We're missing a hand. We're cool, fine, right? This astronaut is in a bad way. Is probably not going to make it. Done. But something about the fact that the arm looks. There's something about the way that you've drawn this part of the arm that just indicates to me that arm or the shoulder is dislocated. So maybe some object sideswiped this astronaut, ripped the hand off, and just arm just popped out. And now he and or she is just kind of, well, this is it. I don't know. It looks brutal.
That could be. Why not?
Oh,
that sounds good to me.
I love it. That being said, Keith, we are at 8. We're like 60 seconds away from 8 o'clock or less. So one, as always, thank you for drawing some absolutely amazing stuff. I am certain that the viewers, whether they're watching now with us live, and if you are, thank you, or sometime in the future, are enjoying the process, because I know I do. And also, thank you for your wise words, your encouragement when it comes to my own creative pursuits, and for sharing your knowledge regarding even just art. I know that the people out there will learn, and I highly enjoy doing this with you, Keith. So thank you.
Yeah, me too. Thank you.
Absolutely. And for the folks at home, if you are watching live, again, thanks. You're the best. If you are watching this sometime in the future, for either group, really, like this video, comment down below what you think of Keith's drawing, what you think of Keith's work in general. Click one of the links down below. Go get some of his work. Enjoy. If you are curious about more interviews or stuff like this that I do, we have a bunch more episodes that you can check out where me and Keith have talked about everything. God, so much. And if nothing else, hit follow for more. And we'll see you next time. Keith, have a good one, buddy.
Take care. Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Golden age to present, digest to oversize. Never miss new comic day. Yeah, no surprise. So where's my no prize? Check the letter columns. Can't find issue 2. Collector problems.